You were not born responsible. Sit with that for a second before you decide whether you agree with it. Because if you were the kid who grew up fast, the kid everyone called so mature, the next few minutes are going to rearrange something in you. But I can't just hand you that sentence and walk away. First, I have to show you where it actually started. Somewhere in a house that looked completely fine from the outside, there was a child who never actually got to be one. They ate breakfast alone. They made their own lunch. They knew the tone of voice that meant not to ask questions. They understood, without being told, that the household ran smoother when they behaved older than they were. And by the time they became an adult, nobody around them, not even themselves, remembered that a small child once did a very large job for years without ever being paid or thanked. That child is now walking around inside a grown-up body, wondering why simple things feel so heavy and why they cannot rest without guilt. If that opening quietly landed somewhere in your chest, stay with me until the end. Because that sentence I opened with has a second half, the part that actually explains it, and once you hear the whole thing, it reframes your entire adult life if you were the child who had to be the adult. Almost nobody will ever say it to you out loud. I will. But only if we walk through the whole thing first, because if I hand it to you now, you will nod and forget it. You have to feel it first to receive it. Psychology has a name for this. It's called parentification, when a child, through no choice of their own, gets placed in a role that was never developmentally theirs to hold. Sometimes that looks practical: cooking, cleaning, raising a younger sibling, running a house the adults weren't running. But the version that does the real damage is emotional. A child becoming the therapist, the peacekeeper, the confidant, the emotional mirror for a parent who couldn't regulate themselves. Children, in their brilliance and their helplessness, will absorb whatever role keeps the house from falling apart. Now here is the part that gets uncomfortable. Most parentified adults do not remember it that way. They remember being praised. They remember being called mature, wise beyond their years, easy, low maintenance, the one nobody had to worry about. And that framing traps them for decades. Because if the world told you your childhood job was a gift, why would you ever question it later? Let me put it another way so you can feel it, not just understand it. Imagine you took a job at age 6. Full time, no pay, no breaks, no sick leave. Your uniform was cheerfulness. Your boss was inconsistent. Your performance review was whether or not the adults around you seemed okay that day. You worked that job through every birthday, every summer break, every school play. And when you finally moved out and became a legal adult, nobody handed you severance. Nobody said thank you. You just kept working the same shift, quietly, for everyone in your adult life, because it was the only role you had ever learned how to play. That is the psychology of the parentified child. And once you see it clearly, some part of you starts to remember things you had filed under normal childhood that were actually anything but. Like being the emotional weather forecaster for the entire family, always scanning the sky of your parents' mood. Like knowing at age 9 exactly what to say to stop an argument in another room. Like feeling responsible for a sibling's happiness before you were old enough to be responsible for your own homework. Like intuitively lying to a teacher about why you were tired because you already knew the truth would create a problem you would then have to solve. Say that last one out loud. That wasn't a coincidence. That was training. These are not small things. Each one was a shift at a job you never signed up for. And the cumulative cost of those years is not paid all at once. It is paid slowly, across your entire adult life, in a currency almost nobody knows how to name. If you are still here, good. Because this is where most people would stop reading and go back to being tired without knowing why. What comes next is the part that changes how you see yourself. Parentified children usually grow into 3 specific kinds of adults. Recognize which one you are. The first is the fixer. This adult scans every relationship the way they once scanned their parent. They find the broken thing before anyone else notices it exists, and they quietly repair it, and they resent it, and they cannot stop doing it. Because being needed is the only proof of love they were ever taught to trust. The second is the Vanisher. This adult swore, somewhere around age 17, that they would never do that job again. So they built a fortress out of independence. They ask for nothing. They accept help from no one. They mistake their emotional armor for a personality. And they wonder, in the quiet moments, why closeness feels like drowning. The third is the both. And this is the hardest one. This adult flips between fixing everyone and disappearing from everyone, sometimes in the same week, sometimes in the same conversation. Because they never got taught the middle setting between being everything and being invisible. They only have the two extremes their childhood installed. Quick thing before we go further. If you just saw yourself in one of those three, put it in the comments right now, just the word fixer, vanisher, or both. I want to see how many of us are actually in this room together. Whichever one you are, here is what I need you to hear. The child version of you was not extraordinary. That is not the compliment adults thought they were giving you. The child version of you was doing the emotional labor of a fully grown adult inside a body that had not yet learned how to tie its own shoelaces properly. That is not maturity. That is survival wearing a costume that fooled everyone around you, including you. And here is the rest of the sentence I opened with tonight. The part that changes everything. You were not born responsible. You were made responsible because the adults around you could not be. Read that again. Because until you can separate those two things, the identity you built to survive and the person you actually are, you will keep confusing your trauma responses for your personality. You will keep believing that being the strong one is who you are, when it was only who you had to become. And you will keep giving that unpaid emotional labor to every partner, every friend, every workplace, every stranger, because it is the only currency your nervous system knows how to trade in. The healing is not learning to be irresponsible. It is not becoming selfish. It is not tearing down every good thing about you that this experience shaped. The healing is much smaller and much harder. It is letting yourself in tiny doses be the child you never got to be. Ask for help before you actually need it. Let someone else pick the restaurant. Cancel the plan without offering 3 reasons. Cry without immediately explaining. Rest without earning it first. And every time it feels wrong, notice that the wrongness is not evidence you are doing it wrong. The wrongness is evidence that a very old part of you is finally being allowed to stop working the shift. You are not selfish for wanting to put the weight down. You were never selfish. You were 8 years old, holding something you were never meant to carry, and you carried it beautifully, and it broke a part of you that nobody ever named until right now. If this described a version of you that has been waiting a very long time to be seen, do me one small thing. Like this video, because it genuinely tells the algorithm to send this to the next quietly grown-up child who needed to hear it. Then subscribe, because everything on this channel lives in this same quiet corner of psychology, the one that finally names what you have been feeling for years. And in the comments, tell me one job you did as a child that no child should have had to do. I read every one of them.